Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back. Hello and welcome to Politics with Sam and Anne, the podcast that tells you everything that you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes, unhindered by my brand new torn knee ligament and reduced mobility.
Oh, poor Sam, why did we ever let you go on holiday? It's good to be back, even if you're the walking wounded. My name's Anne McElvoy from Politico, with me Sam Coates of Sky News. It's Monday, February the 24th, 2025. Today is the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, in a week in which its fate and that of the Allies is in a decisive place.
And in a parallel world this week, if we'd been focusing on domestic policy, we'd have been talking about the chance of a potential by-election in the supposed Labour safe seat of Runcorn and Helsby, if Labour MP Mike Amesbury had pleaded guilty to assault in a late-night street altercation, because he's being sentenced today. Or we'd be talking about whether the government is going to hit its climate targets, because on Wednesday it's all being assessed by the Committee on Climate Change. Or we'd be talking about how the government is almost certain to approve a second full runway at Gatwick, which is likely on Thursday, and just how onerous the government conditions on that might be. All of those things would be the fare for today. But it's not. In reality, we're not going to be doing any of that because since the last time we spoke, global affairs, the situation in Ukraine has remained paramount, and this remains another moment where 2025 is the year where the global matters almost more than the domestic.
Yes, exactly, Sam, because the political terrain's really shifted again, hasn't it, away from the hard yards of domestic policy and back to foreign and security in a big way. Feels like a good day for a recap since we last met here on the podcast. President Trump blamed Ukraine for Russia's invasion. Keir Starmer broke publicly with that and showed his support in a call to Ukraine's President Zelensky. And at the back end of this week, Keir Starmer will head to the White House to talk about defence spending and try to strike some grand bargains in the White House on the security of Europe and on the UK's role, of course. President Macron will have got there just before him. He is also trying to strike a deal. I hear also our playbook reporting that France and the UK working closely together on that. And a new German Chancellor. Congratulations to Friedrich Merz, who has to warm up some very chilly relations between Washington and Berlin, and he's already sent a bit of a bracing signal.
So all of that in a moment, how the domestic and the international are completely interlocked this week. But we're going to give you the trademark week ahead. And as I do it, as you listen to us go through the days, I just want you to note what I've already spotted, which is that when Keir Starmer is in the White House on Thursday, it already looks like other bits of the Whitehall machine have prepared to use Thursday as a take out the trash day. All sorts of inconvenient announcements buried aplenty in a large pile of ministerial statements heading down the track for Thursday. So be sure to not miss those ones, folks. You'll find out what they are in a second. Okay, so with our trademark week ahead rundown, here's Anne with Monday.
Outside of everything to do with Ukraine, the Mike Amesbury assault sentencing takes place. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds is in India for trade talks, and Home Office Minister Jess Phillips is on a visit about what to do about spiking drinks, that is.
On Tuesday, the Ofgem price cap gets announced. Farmers get to vent at Steve Reed at the NFU conference. Reform are doing a State of the State report at 5 o'clock. Liz Kendall is announcing changes to universal credit rent payments, and the Housing Department is announcing rough sleeping funding.
In the evening after PMQs on Wednesday, Keir Starmer heads to Washington. Meanwhile, the Committee on Climate Change spells out how the UK can still hit its carbon budgets.
Which is a massive moment. On Thursday, Keir Starmer has 3 hours of meetings over lunch at the White House. Then there will be a press conference with Donald Trump. Thursday's also the day which the government confirm a second full runway at Gatwick, we think. And then there's the pretty large amount of stuff which ministers won't be too unhappy if it gets buried beneath everything else. So I'll start. Deep breath. There's a big transparency release from the Cabinet Office, including details of ministers' external interests.
And who doesn't love hearing about those? Also on Thursday, there are results of a trial on puberty blockers. Something about the Home Office Contingency Fund, which, from memory, was at the heart of last summer's black hole row. And something else on pension credit claims and a slew of NHS data on the winter crisis, the future of the workforce, and GP appointments. Quite a lot going on there.
Absolutely. On Friday, Keir Starmer presumably heading back from Washington. That feels a long way away right now. But let's start with the developing news overnight and its impact on everything UK and global. That's the German elections. The big results is that we're set to have a new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, after his Conservative Party came out on top in the elections. The AfD, the hard-right party, coming in second with their best showing of any such party since the Second World War. And you are a preeminent German politics expert. Can you just explain the significance of what we've seen overnight, both for Germany itself and for the rest of us?
Well, the main thing we've seen, Sam, is Friedrich Merz emerge as Chancellor. So we've had that switch from a social democratic-led Germany under Olaf Scholz to the Christian Democrats with a pretty solid result there. The AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, the far-right party, doing well as well, about a fifth of the vote, but several points behind Friedrich Merz, and he will be happy with that. So it sort of takes away that sense, perhaps, that the AfD was the, inverted commas, real winner. It's still difficult on the numbers that he has to form the coalition that he wants, which is really to have as few people in it as possible. Very, very bad result for the Social Democrats, but that doesn't mean that they won't end up in a coalition. This is how the sausage gets made in German politics. But the really striking thing was that Friedrich Merz, I was saying a bit earlier, he was going to warm up relations with Washington. Well, that was in a way the expectation. He still wants to have a functioning relationship, but he has stressed that he wants to see Europe independent of the US, and he has really used those words, that Keir Starmer would avoid, saying we need autonomy. He said, I never thought I would find myself having to blast interference in Germany's election from the US. I've got this from his comments about Elon Musk. But basically, he sends a very strong signal that he doesn't think that the US can be relied on in Europe anymore. We have to be present in Europe again, he says, of Germany and the other European powers. So that's quite an interesting intro, isn't it, for his relationship with Keir Starmer, who's just about to go off with a bit of a softer bouquet, so to speak, to Washington.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you'd expect at the moment that a leader was elected, that they no longer needed to play to voters, that an incoming Chancellor of Germany, one of the most significant countries in the EU, would immediately pivot to trying to reach out and be a sort of global bridge builder, particularly at a moment like this, particularly at a moment where France and the UK are trying to do exactly that. So it was quite stunning that he did exactly the opposite overnight. The moment that he was elected, the moment he was heading into the Chancellor's hot seat, he started criticising and attacking Donald Trump rather than trying to make life easier for his European allies. And we do feel like we're in this pivotal week, but the consequence of the German elections is, as you mentioned just then, actually, he doesn't become Chancellor immediately. There is maybe 2 months of coalition building. What does all this mean for the UK and what's going on globally at the moment to not have, also to have an interim German government, maybe for as long as until Easter?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to point out that flinty tone from Friedrich Merz. And that's the kind of character he is. He's touching 70, he's been around a lot of years, he's pretty confident character. And he's made clear that he wants to speak very directly, that I think he thinks it doesn't really help Europe or help Germany to be on the back foot and in a state of permanent panic about what Donald Trump or Elon Musk have just said. So he's obviously going to strike a different tone there to the way that the UK or Macron are handling things, Sam. And I think it's going to be very interesting in the sense that, as you point out, he doesn't really get the full steering wheel until he gets his coalition into place. We've seen that take months in the past. I'm going out there on this one. I'm there to be wrong on this one. But I wonder, given the urgency of the situation, whether there won't be a view all round that sitting around fiddling around with, who's going to get what brief in German politics would look a bit like fiddling while Europe burnt, and they may move a bit faster. But I think on the numbers that he has, on the falling off of the Social Democrats, we've seen the Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius, a man to watch, also who actually likes the UK and signed the UK-German defence agreement. He says there are no excuses for this terrible result that we've had. So in a sense, they're in the position a bit like the Conservatives in the UK after the last election. The Social Democrats, it's the inverse, really look like they're on the floor. And I think in that situation, the relationship of Keir Starmer to Friedrich Merz will be the one that counts, and it will be so long, farewell, fine affair. But now it's over, if you get the cabaret reference there, Sam.
There are two different approaches that world leaders have taken broadly towards Donald Trump in his first incarnation. One is the British one of very rarely directly publicly criticising and trying to maintain the so-called special relationship. And the other is the playbook of Malcolm Turnbull. And it looks to me like Merz is sort of taken a leaf out of the former Australian Prime Minister's book. And his line in interviews consistently for months is actually, don't try and be his friend. Don't try and suck up to Donald Trump. What he listens to is somebody with hard negotiating red lines who goes in with an uncompromising asks and is a straight dealer, but doesn't try to suck up to him. So a different approach there from the incoming German Chancellor. Will it work? Is it useful for Europe to have different types of approach amongst its different leaders? Well, we'll see. I wonder with Donald Trump whether he just doesn't see the EU as one big lump, and so it ends up being quite unhelpful. But all of this, to use that ghastly journalistic phrase, time will tell. Ukraine is top of the list of things today, and there's incredible amount going on connected to the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which is today. So at 9 a.m, President Zelensky of Ukraine is convening a virtual meeting of sympathetic world leaders. So one big person, one big holder of office missing there. That'll be live streamed on YouTube. Where else? At 5:15, President Macron is in the White House ahead of a 7 p.m. UK time press conference with him and Trump. So that's something that Downing Street will be watching very carefully. Round about the same time that President Macron goes into the White House, Keir Starmer's having a reception about Ukraine with John Healey, the Defence Secretary, also going. There's fresh announcements about sanctions. There's a Ministry of Defence announcement on medical and rehab support for Ukrainians. And there's probably going to be David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, in the Commons, subject to all the usual niceties with the Speaker. But this all boils down to hard choices, Anne. And the US is actually forcing a hard choice today, sort of almost incredibly. And this was slightly exploding diplomats' heads that I was talking to last night. Now, this might change in the coming hours. So if this is out of date at the point at which you listen to this, then forgive me, but it's been a real problem overnight. But as it stands, the US have put down a motion in the Security Council at the UN, which states their position. It's a brief draft resolution that states their position on Ukraine. And of course, it is very, very different from what countries like the UK and the US are used to. This text neither acknowledges that Russia is the cause of the Ukraine conflict, nor does it acknowledge Ukraine's sovereignty. And so we have this incredible spectacle that, all weekend diplomats have been trying to avoid a moment today. They might succeed, but this incredible spectacle later today that we might end up with a vote on a US motion that 5 European nations abstain and Russia and China vote with the US because the US's position on Ukraine has changed so fundamentally. Now, I think Britain and other countries can go out of their way to try and stop this being something that happens later today, and they may well succeed. But that, to me, is possibly the moment of the day, if it happens, over there in New York in the Security Council of Europe, facing being on the, certainly having to abstain, in some cases potentially voting against the US motion on something that has united everybody for so many years.
It's interesting, isn't it, having covered, as you did too, Sam, all those torrid UN sessions and motions and counter motions in the run-up to the Iraq war, how we're just seeing the alignment is now just so completely different. You're seeing that Russia, as you point out, more aligned there with other big non-democratic power blocs like Russia and China, and Europe trying to figure out, and you touched on it, does it kind of go in as always as one voice and go through, if you like, through the EU door? There are various views about whether that's less effective actually than just each country going up, saying not in my name, says the UK, not in my name, says Friedrich Merz, even more strongly, as we've heard this morning. He won't be there yet, but in spirit he will be. And it'd be interesting also how President Macron, who is experienced at this, rather good at weaving interests together, how far does he get in what I understand to be an attempt to slow down, and working very closely with the Foreign Office and the UK in general, to slow down this dash to disaster, as it's been internally called in many circles close to government, so that Ukraine is not left hanging out there with that motion, which is not helpful to Ukraine, to say, not blaming Russia for the invasion and not really fully supporting Ukraine as it goes forward to preserve its independence in the conflict.
So we've got these two meetings this week, President Macron with Trump today, and then Keir Starmer with Trump on Thursday. We know a little bit about both of their strategies, or what they publicly say are their strategies, because that'll only be a small part of it. But when it comes to President Macron, he was talking about it on an online event last week, and he said, look, I'm going to make big play to President Trump that, if you back down on Ukraine, this will make you look weak against President Putin, and that's not you. That's not your trademark. Be strong. So President Macron's sort of number one tactic, he's saying publicly, is to say it would be weak in order to give Russia too many concessions on Ukraine. So appealing to Trump the negotiator, appealing to Trump the strongman, appealing almost to Trump, the mafia boss, so a sort of psychological technique. Keir Starmer's going to go in with a very different approach. Keir Starmer's going to go in and say, look, we agree with you. We agree that defence spending across EU nations isn't high enough. We in the UK are going to raise it, or there's a sort of asterisk by exactly what he's going to say and exactly how ambitious the UK is prepared to be, and whether or not any of that will cut it with President Trump. And he's going to say we need all to work together, and we need a US guarantee behind any kind of UK and French force that might stay behind after any peace deal. So Keir Starmer taking a very different pose towards Donald Trump than President Macron, but both leaders speaking on the phone last night, working together, presumably the White House and the Elysee, presumably Downing Street and the Elysee coordinating very closely behind the scenes. The question is, we're building this week up to being a kind of totemic week, and I've heard people talk about it being a very consequential week, but I seem to remember we actually said that last week as well, and I've said it quite a lot of weeks on this podcast. Do these things really cause any change of outcome, Anne, or are we kidding ourselves that a Macron and a Starmer visit matter that much?
I think what they can change, Sam, is the pace of events and trying to slow down this helter-skelter, this tempo that has been set, and it's a kind of shock and awe, and it's something that Donald Trump just does. It is his playbook, isn't it? Is to go out there, go fully strong into a position. It scatters the cats everywhere, and then he sort of drives through and slams down on the table what his demands are. So I think that is something that maybe does unite the approaches of, and I think you're absolutely right, in style and tone and what they say publicly, Macron and Starmer have differences, but they do have a joint interest in basically not having this just go through kind of on the nod. And we've also seen, we are not talking enough, it strikes me here, and this is in a way what Donald Trump would like about Zelensky. We're not talking about the Ukraine position in this and how that is supported. Now, he's also thrown a bit of a cat on the table by saying, you know what, I'm prepared to go. If you don't like me, and it's very clear, I think, from Donald Trump's recent comments that he doesn't, and has cast aspersions rather unfairly on whether he's properly elected, etc. He said, if you don't like me, I will go in return for NATO membership. That's also quite, everyone is now doing the art of the deal, aren't they? Everybody's trying to put their own plan on the table, or a card that has to be dealt with. And that's Zelensky's in the last, overnight, I think, last few hours. He said, look, I'm not clinging on to power here. as soon as we get to some form of peace where we can hold elections, we do that. I'm prepared to say I'll stand aside, but we have to be on a track to NATO membership. Interesting, that one. The UK will like that. Other countries in Europe perhaps lukewarm. And does Donald Trump listen to any of them? Well, maybe not, but probably what it's doing is showing that there are more schisms within the administration, and that will perhaps tie Donald Trump up in dealing with some of his own splits there between the more hawkish people in his administration, General Kellogg, etc., and those he does seem to listen to, who just want peace at any price as long as that benefits the US.
It's quite interesting. You reference President Zelensky giving some circumstances, impossible seeming circumstances at the moment, under which he might step down. That's seen as, as you just said, as a bit of a sort of olive branch to not just to Donald Trump, but also to Western allies. I picked up a bit of frustration in UK diplomatic circles about the way President Zelensky's been conducting himself recently. One person said to me, look, he was quite smart at the point at which Donald Trump was elected. He praised him at the point at which he came into office. But subsequently, President Zelensky was seen as throwing his toys out of the pram and in doing so, making his own life more difficult when it comes to relations with Donald Trump. And so this is, in some senses, as you say, him re-entering into a more complex negotiation at a point where Ukraine seems to be negotiating this absolutely critical minerals deal with the US, which could be one giant cog of it. On the surface, it's about reparations and it's about the US being compensated for the help that the Biden administration gave them. But big gap, huge sums involved. The US originally asking for $500 billion worth of compensation. Ukraine thinking that they only owe about $90 billion if the US is to be compensated. You can see those two sides coming together over time. But could we get a deal on minerals? That might be more consequential than the two meetings this week that the leaders have, because any rupture in that, any failure to do that, could actually set back peace talks and peace negotiations some way and actually cause more of a problem for European countries than just about anything else that could happen this week.
If you're talking about minerals and deals, you're in a business transactional relationship, and that's why I think that is kept on the table. The odd thing about this is nobody really knows what the minerals are, what they're worth. Well, we kind of know what they are, but we don't really know their status, what they're worth in the international market, the difficulties of mining and infrastructure in Ukraine, not least since the invasion and the damage done. So it's quite, in a sense, it's a sort of kind of black comedy here, that there's a negotiation going on about something nobody really knows how extractable it is and what the value is. But where I do think it is useful, some people think it's rather cynical to have lent into this, and having just maybe been around, sort of Russia, Ukraine, etc. for a few years previously, I can completely see why, in a sense, Zelensky does lean into this. It's interesting the way you see his posture there. But I mean, remember, he is a democratically elected leader. Whenever Donald Trump says he's under immense pressure as well to deliver for Ukraine here, and when we say throwing his toys out of the pram, well, you can see how that might strike tonally. That might sometimes jar with the West. But my goodness, if you're a country that's at war, besieged, and then you've got the American president kind of dropping you from a great height, you might also feel that your toys could be hurled somewhere.
When it comes to the art of the deal, one deal that we make with listeners so that we don't go on for more than 20 minutes, we have failed this morning and gone for a little bit longer than that. Please forgive us at the start of a very busy week. But we will be back tomorrow to try and explain how on earth anyone pays for any of this stuff. So we'll see you on Tuesday morning. See you then.
Art of the deal it is. Bye-bye.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.